US President Donald Trump is building a wall. Maybe you've heard about it.
I've already started building the wall, just a concrete protector, but the wall behind it, a steel barrier. The border wall, to build the wall, border wall.
We're building a lot of wall.
The wall or the barrier. The wall, physical barrier. We need the wall. Wall.
But with all this talk about the border wall in the US, it got me thinking, do walls work? And can President Trump learn from military walls? Border walls or barriers aren't anything new. In fact, I'm actually walking along one of the oldest border walls on the planet, and this is Hadrian's Wall, built by the Romans to keep pesky barbarians from Scotland, like me, out of the Roman Empire. There's border walls all over the world, some of them highly militarized. Looking at them, they tend to have something in common. They all have more than just one wall. I wanted to test that theory with some of the world's military wall experts, so I've come here to speak to the guys at HESCO.
The concept is brilliant. You know, it's so easy to transport. It folds flat. It's relatively light, but once you fill it, and you can normally fill it with almost any fill material that you find, then the performance of the product is outstanding. To coin the phrase, it was a real game changer for a lot of the militaries. So there's a quote by some generals saying it was the biggest evolution in force protection for the last 500 years or something. Don't quote me on that, but it's something like that. Gabions are not a new idea. I mean, the Romans used them. They had wicker baskets and they filled them with dirt. So it's not a new idea, and the concept's very old. Take it to the next level and develop, let's say, the 21st century version of that.
This invention changed the way modern armies go to war. You've probably seen them before. It might seem like a relatively simple design, but before HESCO, only a few decades ago, soldiers would have to build walls out of sandbags. Not quite as fast. So how did HESCO come about?
So HESCO, it's nearly 30 years old. It was developed and invented by a local guy to Leeds. His name was Jimmy Heselden. So Jimmy had a property on the East Coast, and it was very close to a cliff face which was eroding away. And he wanted a product that he could install rapidly and effectively, and that it would stop the further corrosion to the coast. He developed the lined gabion unit, constructed it on the cliff face, filled it with cement, and then as a result that saved his property.
So this invention that started in someone's garage has really become a whole system that changes the way modern militaries can go to war. It can be simple walls like this one behind me, or they can be unloaded out the back of an ISO container at speed. There's a whole range of products that use this simple structure to make bigger, more useful things like a accommodation block or weapon stores, anything like that. It's allowed for new tactics where forward operating bases can be constructed overnight. But an effective barrier is always more than just one wall.
Usually, to have an effective wall, it needs to be part of a suite of a solution to basically delay or deter an attacker. So where you would have a solid earth-filled wall, then usually you would have some form of standoff, which is a distance between the wall and another product, for instance a fence. So a potential attacker, he has to break through many layers of defence to even before he gets to the wall itself. The important thing is that you react in the time it takes the potential attacker to get through that system.
It depends what your site is. I mean, you can have a perimeter that's hundreds of kilometres long. Is your attack going to be vehicle-based? Is it going to be explosives? There's lots and lots of things that you've got to consider when you're putting together a site.
One of the things you have to do, even though you've got something to physically stop a bomb, a bullet, or a car, or a person, you've got to physically watch that barrier. Because if you don't watch it, people will get through it, over it, around it, what have you. So you have to watch whatever system you've deployed.
On military operations, this layered defence is everywhere, and what HESCO were saying is nothing new. Back in the Cold War, these same defensive techniques were used all across the inner Germany border. And although it started being taken down in 1989, there's plenty of places across Europe where you can still see some of its remains today. It's the most recent border wall that would be anywhere near the size of a wall separating Mexico and the United States. When it was built, the world was in the depths of a Cold War. The Iron Curtain separated East and West. On one side, the Soviet Union and communism, and on the other, the countries that were allied to the United States or neutral. It cut Germany and Europe in half, and was one of the most militarised and highly defended borders the world had ever seen. Migration from east to west of the Iron Curtain was a big problem for the Soviet Union. Thousands of people leaving didn't look good for communism. In the 5 years following the Second World War, over 15 million people left Soviet-occupied Eastern European countries to live in the West. So immigration was effectively halted after 1950, and border defences were erected. This border, this fence, wasn't built to keep people out. It was built to keep people in, and it worked. Before the first walls and fences were erected, more than 200,000 people were leaving the German Democratic Republic every year to live in the West. But when the barriers went up in 1961, that number fell dramatically. And it stayed this low until the walls and fences eventually came down in 1989. Unlike the proposal for President Trump's wall, this border was not one obstruction. This border was multiple different things that were built to keep people from crossing. So we have the road that I'm not on now, which was built just to speed up the reaction of police that might know that there's someone escaping. There was a forensic line so that they could keep track of how many people had crossed or identify vehicles, that sort of thing. You had the anti-vehicle barrier, and then you had the fence behind it, one of many fences, sometimes with automatically firing weapon systems, mines, dogs. This was not one wall, and that's why it worked. And they had to keep adding all the way up until 1989 when the Democratic Republic failed, because people still were managing to succeed, even though it was smaller numbers. Okay, so walls, fences, they can work, but they need a whole range of additional defences and surveillance. As early as 122 AD, the Roman Empire was building with this in mind, and that's why all along the wall there's huge forts like this one, and these were to house the garrisons of soldiers that were required to keep a wall this long effective. By the way, these toilets are nearly 2,000 years old. So that's Hadrian's Wall just behind me, and it's built here strategically on this cliff. Oh, I hate heights. But much of this is already in place along the US-Mexico border, and what you see there is often similar to what you might see on military operations. There's aerostats watching for migrants, patrols of border guards, boats, trucks, seismic sensors, motion cameras, and they train with the military to practice catching illegal migrants. One of my colleagues is actually ex-Royal Navy, and he's been on this training before. Hey Matt.
What's up?
You got a sec?
Yeah, sure. So I was working with Commander Helicopter Force on 845 Squadron, and we deployed down to Southern California in El Centro to play in the desert. So whilst we were there, the US Border Patrol asked if we would like to participate in an exercise with them. The exercise consisted of being 3 teams being dropped off near the border and make it to an RV point via the next morning without being captured. So I got a quick video that I shot during the exercise. So as you can probably see there, you've got the Sea King coming to pick us up. By this point they've already dropped 2 of the teams off, so we're the last team to be dropped off. Yeah, we get out, the Sea King goes off. We had a very basic map and compass, and away we went to conduct the night exercise. We got dropped off about 6 PM in the evening, and we had to be at the RV point by 6 AM then the following morning, so we were running the whole entire night. But to get to the RV point, we had to cross a small, well, we thought was a fairly low mountain range, but we got to it, and it wasn't. It was pretty tough going through there. Climbing down dried up waterfalls, rock faces, that sort of thing to get down to the other side. You can't move through the day, it's just too hot. You're looking at 45 degrees. So we rested through the day, and at the night that's when we made our moves. They would get pretty close. We would get down on our belt buckles and they would drive past. But the things they're looking for is tracks, footprints, that sort of stuff, and they can work out the direction of travel, how many people in a group, that sort of thing. So when we were waiting for our vehicle pickup, the vehicle was not far out, and we were hiding in a ditch, and the dog sniffed us out, and the dog caught us. 2 of the 3 teams were captured. We were captured 2 minutes before our necks, so yeah, they were very good.
The border between the US and Mexico is already heavily guarded. In the late 80s, the first walls were being built using military surplus helicopter landing mats from Vietnam. But even still, with all that money spent, people are still making it across. Will a wall along the entire border, along with the expansion of existing defences, decrease illegal migration? Possibly. Walls have proven to be significant on military operations throughout history. But in modern defence, they're much more effective when they make use of technology and a complex layered system. And when it takes more than just a barrier to defend your average military base, defending 2,000 miles of border will too. And it's going to cost a lot. And yes, this is the wall that inspired Game of Thrones.
I smiled at the camera. Hi. That's your fault, you just finished.
Have you got a sec, Matt?
Oh my god.
Hey Matt, have you got a sec?
Yes.
Jesus.